if you're just joining us for 5 minutes a day, guided devotion, we are going to be continuing through the book of Luke. So today we are in Luke 2, 41 to 51. And we are seeing who is this Jesus and how does he model loving God? How does he live out his faith? Who does he interact with? How does he treat them? And what's interesting here in this passage is we don't see a lot about Jesus' life before his ministry starts at 30. We see his birth, which is in Luke chapter 2, and then we see that he's dedicated, and then we see this little snapshot of his childhood at age 12. And that's all we see. And then he comes into the scene again at age 30. And so let's look at this scene here with Jesus at the temple. And I'm actually going to read it all. So let's start in 41. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. So one thing to know is at the age of 12, Jesus would be considered a Jewish male. He would be considered a legal adult. He would be required to attend these festivals for himself, not just as a child, but all Jewish males were required to attend these festivals. There were 3 of them, Passover, Pentecost, and the Tabernacles. All right, so here they are at the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. So what was really interesting is that they traveled in this large caravan, and they traveled in 2 different groups. So it would be the women and the young children, and then there would be the men. And so Jesus could go back and forth because he was just right at the cusp of manhood at 12. And so he could be with the women and children and no one would think anything, or he could be with the men. So that's why it was easy to think, oh, he must be in that other group, or he must be over there, and not realize that he wasn't in either of those groups. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So here we see Jesus' duality, right? We see him as he is the Son of God, but he's also the son of human parents, right? He isn't done growing in his childhood. He doesn't just say, peace out, I'm just going to stay in the temple here with my Father God and goodbye, thank you. No, he isn't done growing. So he submits to them, he's obedient to them, and he goes home with them, and he continues to grow. He continues to grow in wisdom and stature, and people like him. It says he has favor with man and with God as well. So as we join this story, we're going to be unpacking who is this Jesus. But as I want you to think about that last sentence here, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. What about you? Do you live your life in favor with God and man? I always ask my students, because for a long time I was going on campuses and doing ministry on campuses, And so sometimes if I had students in youth group, I would say to them, if I told someone, or either way, if I met one of your friends and I told them you came to this club, talked about God, or if I told them that you went to church, would they say, oh yes, that makes sense? Or would they say, what? That person's a Christian? That person goes to a Christian club? That person doesn't act like a Christian. Right. And sometimes they would be really embarrassed. And that happened a lot. And I just kind of love to see, like, what would your friends say? Would this make sense to them? Or would they think, no, this person doesn't even live as someone who follows God? And so the same question, if I met your coworkers, would they say, oh yes, that makes sense? Or they would know that you're a Christian? Or would your neighbors think, oh yes, that person, the way they treat us, the way they're kind to us, I can tell that they are a Christian. So just a question to be thinking about. I remember when I was about 12 years old, and I was somewhere in middle school. This is before I got my license. And I took the bus to school, and I went to a Christian school. And I remember when I got off the bus driver said to me, and she said, I knew you were a Christian. I could tell. And I always wondered that, like, how could she tell that I was a Christian, right? I wasn't wearing a cross back then. How could she tell? And I always just remember that. She's like, I knew you were a Christian. And I think about that, like, do people know just the way we treat others or how we present ourselves? Do we have favor with the people around us? Just something to think about today. So I will see you tomorrow. Have a good day.